readers, welcome to Book Chat. My name is Leslie and I'm the Reading Machine Coordinator for Monterey County Free Libraries. Today for Book Chat, the book I have is called Grief is the Thing with Feathers. It is written by Max Porter, published in 2015, and clocks in at a very, very short 114 pages. So it is technically a novella, and don't let that fool you though, because this is a tough book, okay? Before I dive in to it, I am going to read the book jacket description to you, or the summary, I should say. Okay, here he is, husband and father, scruffy romantic, a shambolic scholar, a man adrift in the wake of his wife's sudden accidental death. And there are his two sons who, like him, struggle in their London flat to embrace the unbearable sadness that has engulfed them. The father imagines a future of well-meaning visitors and emptiness, while the boys wander, savage and unsupervised. In this moment of violent despair, they are visited by Crow, antagonist, trickster, goad, protector, therapist, and babysitter. This self-described sentimental bird, at once wild and tender, who finds humans dull, except in grief, threatens to stay with a wounded family until they no longer need him. As weeks turn to months and the pain of loss lessens with the balm of memories, Crow's efforts are rewarded and the little unit of 3 begins to recover. Dad resumes his book about the poet Ted Hughes. The boys get on with it, grow up. All right. Sounds pretty simple, right? But it's actually not. First of all, this is a very literary book, okay? So the title itself, Grief is the Thing with Feathers, actually takes its name from an Emily Dickinson poem, which is called, actually I don't know if it's called that, but it says in the poem, hope is the thing with feathers, okay? And then what I like so much, I just really love these kinds of details, is that the epigraph is a poem by Emily Dickinson, and Crow is replacing some of these words inside, and that specifically relates to this story, which I I like that very much. Also, a lot of this book alludes to the poet Ted Hughes. He was an English poet who wrote, you know, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and until his death in 1998. And he was married to a woman, also a poet, named Sylvia Plath. You may have heard of her. She's pretty darn famous, and after she died at an early age. She took her own life. He wrote a book of poetry called Crow. And the Crow poems were basically him dealing with his wife's death. And it is an incredibly stunning collection. One of the best poetry collections I've ever read. And so for me, because I've read that book before, and because I know about Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath, this book really resonates with me. So, you know, it might not for other people. It's hard to say. But anyways, so like I said, the dad in this story is writing a book about the poet Ted Hughes and his mythology of Crow. And it's worth noting that when Sylvia Plath died, she did leave behind 2 children, and it's really hard to not imagine this book as a retelling of that particular literary tragedy. So anyway, as I was saying, this is not an easy book. It begs to be read more than once. There's a lot to absorb. Part of that is because it's told from 3 different points of view. So there's the dad, the sons, and then Crow. And then they're presented in these like really short vignettes, and the point of view changes very quickly, and each change is marked by a title, so you can tell who's writing at that point or who's speaking at that point. And it's not written in a straightforward way, so it kind of alternates between, you know, this really poetic writing to onomatopoeia, which is just essentially sounds. There's fairy tales, fact-driven narratives. It's just really different depending on who's talking and kind of what's going on. So the voice of Crow itself changes from section to section. And I find that really interesting and satisfying because Crow himself is a shapeshifter. So in trying to look for an excerpt from this book, it was difficult because so much of it needs to be read in context. But I finally decided to read the very first section from the father's point of view. And this is when Crow shows up for the first time. And this is it's a little long, but stick with me. Okay. 4 or 5 days after she died, I sat alone in the living room wondering what to do. Shuffling around, waiting for shock to give way, waiting for any kind of structured feeling to emerge from the organizational fakery of my days. I felt hung empty. The children were asleep. I drank. I smoked roll-ups out of the window. I felt that perhaps the main result of her being gone would be that I would permanently become this organizer, this list-making trader in cliches of gratitude, machine-like architect of routines for small children with no mum. Grief felt fourth-dimensional, abstract, faintly familiar. I was cold. The friends and family who had been hanging around being kind had gone home to their own lives. When the children went to bed, the flat had no meaning. Nothing moved. The doorbell rang and I braced myself for more kindness. Another lasagna, some books, a cuddle, some little potted ready meals for the boys. Of course, I was becoming expert in the behavior of orbiting grievers. Being at the epicenter grants a curiously anthropological awareness of everybody else. The overwhelms, the affectedly lackadaisicals, the nothing so fars, the overstayers, the new best friends of hers, of mine, of the boys. The people I still have no idea who they were. I felt like Earth in that extraordinary picture of the planet surrounded by a thick belt of space junk. I felt it would be years before the knotted string dream of other people's performances of woe for my dead wife would thin enough for me to see any black space again. And of course, needless to say, thoughts of this kind made me feel guilty. But I thought, in support of myself, everything has changed and she is gone, and I can think what I like. She would approve because we were always over-analytical, cynical, probably disloyal, puzzled. Dinner party post-mortem bitches with kind intentions, hypocrites, friends. The bell rang again. I climbed down the carpeted stairs into the chilly hallway and opened the front door. There were no streetlights, bins, or paving stones. No shape or light, no form at all. Just a stench. There was a crack and a whoosh, and I was smacked back, winded, onto the doorstep. The hallway was pitch black and freezing cold, and I thought, what kind of world is it that I would be robbed in my home tonight? And then I thought, frankly, what does it matter? I thought, please don't wake the boys. They need their sleep. I will give you every penny I own, just as long as you don't wake the boys. I opened my eyes, and it was still dark, and everything was crackling, rustling. Feathers. There was a rich smell of decay, a sweet furry stink of just beyond edible food, and moss, and leather, and yeast. Feathers between my fingers, and my eyes, and my mouth, beneath me a feathery hammock lifting me up a foot above the tiled floor. One shiny jet black eye as big as my face, blinking slowly in a leathery, wrinkled socket, bulging out from a football-sized testicle. Shh, shh. And this is what he said. I won't leave you until you don't need me anymore. Put me down, I said. Not until you say hello. Put me down, I croaked, and my piss warmed the cradle of his wing. You're frightened. Just say hello. Hello. Say it properly. I lay back, resigned, and wished my wife wasn't dead. I wished I wasn't lying terrified of a giant bird embraced in my hallway. I wished I hadn't been obsessing about this thing just when the greatest tragedy of my life occurred. These were factual yearnings. It was bitterly wonderful. I had some clarity. Hello, Crow, I said. Good to finally meet you. So, I love that because it is so metaphorical and so true to what grief feels like. Like this big, gigantic black thing that just comes and like threatens to swallow you whole and you have no control over what is happening. And I think that is just, I just love it so much. That's about all I can say about it because it's just so so real, you know, even though it's just not, it's not real, you know, it's like, it's metaphor, it's fantastical, you know, maybe more metaphorical. And that's one of the questions of this book is like, is the crow actually real, or is it just, is it grief? So I love this book. I am going to have to reread it. I have only read it once. And it's, again, like I said, a question, not a question, but a definite need to reread this one. You definitely, I think, either have to go really, really slowly, or you have to be willing to give it, you know, another shot to get through it. And it doesn't take long to read, you know, very, very short, but there's a lot in here. So obviously I recommend this one, with a caveat that yes, take your time with it. Maybe you won't get everything out of it the first time. I really don't think I did. And, but I think it was worth it. As you could tell, it's beautifully well written. The story is very true to life, even though it is obviously not true. And, you know, it's got everything that I love about reading in it. So thank you so much for joining me for this week's book chat. I hope that you are reading some awesome books, and I hope to hear from you. Maybe you could tell me about what you've been reading or what you think about this particular book if you do decide to read it. And I will see you next time. Okay, bye.